The story of the United States and Iran is a long and deeply complicated one, filled with moments of cooperation and intense, bitter conflict. To understand the headlines of today, on June 23, 2025, we must look back over 70 years. The relationship we see now, defined by mistrust and military posturing, has its roots in a single pivotal event. This event set the stage for decades of resentment. It was a moment that reshaped Iran's political landscape and forever altered its perception of the West, particularly the United States. Many historians and Iranians alike point to this moment as the original sin in the relationship. In 1953, Iran was led by a democratically elected prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh. He was a popular nationalist figure who sought to give his country more control over its own resources. His most significant policy was the nationalization of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which had been controlled by the British for decades. This move deeply angered the United Kingdom, which then turned to the United States for help. The US government, under President Eisenhower, was worried about Soviet influence in the region during the Cold War and saw Mossadegh's actions as a potential threat. Acting on these fears, the American Central Intelligence Agency, along with British intelligence, orchestrated a coup. They worked to undermine Mossadegh's government, fomenting unrest and supporting pro-monarchy forces. The operation, codenamed Operation Ajax, was successful. Prime Minister Mossadegh was overthrown and placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. This covert action ended Iran's brief experiment with democracy and brought the monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, back to absolute power. The Shah would become one of America's closest allies in the Middle East. The coup had profound and lasting consequences. While it secured Western access to Iranian oil and installed a friendly leader on the throne, it left a deep scar on the Iranian psyche. For many, the United States was no longer seen as a beacon of democracy, but as a self-interested power that would interfere in the sovereignty of other nations to protect its own economic and geopolitical goals. This act of intervention planted the seeds of anti-American sentiment that would grow and eventually explode into a revolution a quarter of a century later, a revolution that would completely upend the relationship. For the next 26 years, the Shah ruled Iran with an iron fist, backed by unwavering American support. The United States even helped Iran start a civilian nuclear program in the 1950s under the Atoms for Peace initiative. However, beneath the surface of this alliance, resentment simmered. The Shah's regime was seen by many of his people as oppressive, corrupt, and beholden to Western interests. This discontent finally boiled over in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution. The Shah was forced to flee, and a new leader, the exiled Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, returned to establish the Islamic Republic of Iran. The revolution fundamentally transformed Iran and its relationship with the United States. The new government was fiercely anti-American, viewing the US as the great Satan for its long support of the Shah. Tensions reached a breaking point in late 1979. The United States made the decision to allow the exiled and ailing Shah into the country for cancer treatment. This act was seen in Tehran as a prelude to another American-backed plot to restore him to power, just as they had done in 1953. The fears and anger among revolutionary students overflowed. In November 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They captured the diplomatic staff, beginning a crisis that would shock the world. 52 Americans were held hostage for 444 agonizing days. The crisis dominated American television screens and crippled the presidency of Jimmy Carter. In response, the United States formally severed all diplomatic relations with Iran in 1980 and imposed economic sanctions. The hostage crisis ended just moments after Ronald Reagan was inaugurated in 1981, but the damage was permanent. It cemented an image of Iran in the American mind as a hostile, radical state. Throughout the 1980s, the hostility only deepened. During the brutal Iran-Iraq War, the United States provided support to Iraq's leader, Saddam Hussein. In 1988, a U.S. naval ship in the Persian Gulf shot down an Iranian civilian airliner, Iran Air Flight 655, killing all 290 people on board. The U.S. called it a tragic mistake, but for Iranians it was another unforgivable act of aggression. Throughout the 1990s, under President Bill Clinton, the U.S. tightened sanctions, citing Iran's nuclear ambitions and its support for groups like Hezbollah as justification for the economic pressure. The turn of the century brought little relief. After the September 11th attacks, there was a brief period of quiet, behind-the-scenes cooperation against the Taliban in Afghanistan, a mutual enemy. But this was quickly overshadowed when President George W. Bush labeled Iran as part of an axis of evil in 2002. This declaration soured any chance of improved relations. The discovery of undeclared nuclear activities in Iran led to years of escalating international sanctions, which crippled the Iranian economy but failed to halt its nuclear program. The standoff appeared to be a permanent feature of global politics. However, a significant diplomatic breakthrough occurred during the Obama administration. After years of secret and then public negotiations, Iran and a group of world powers, the US, UK, France, Germany, Russia and China, reached a landmark agreement in 2015. It was called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. Under the deal, Iran agreed to severely limit its sensitive nuclear activities and allow international inspections. In exchange, the crushing international sanctions that had hobbled its economy for years would be lifted. It was a historic moment of diplomacy over conflict. For a few years, the deal largely held. International inspectors repeatedly confirmed that Iran was complying with its obligations. The agreement was a major foreign policy achievement for President Obama, and a sign that even the most entrenched conflicts could be resolved through negotiation. However, the deal was fiercely opposed by some in the United States, as well as by US allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. They argued that the deal was too lenient and did not address Iran's other activities, such as its ballistic missile program or its regional influence. This opposition found a powerful voice in Donald Trump. During his 2016 presidential campaign, he repeatedly called the JCPOA the worst deal ever. In May 2018, President Trump made good on his promise and unilaterally withdrew the United States from the nuclear agreement. He reimposed punishing sanctions on Iran, a strategy he called maximum pressure. This decision stunned America's European allies who had helped broker the deal. In response to the renewed US pressure and the lack of economic benefits, Iran began to gradually exceed the nuclear limits it had agreed to under the JCPOA. The years following the US withdrawal from the nuclear deal were marked by escalating tensions. In 2020, a US drone strike ordered by President Trump killed Qasem Soleimani, one of Iran's most powerful generals, pushing the two nations to the brink of war. After Trump's return to the presidency, his administration attempted to restart negotiations in early 2025. An offer was made for a new deal, but Iran's supreme leader publicly rejected it, stating the US was imposing demands, not genuinely negotiating. Despite this, secret back-channel talks began, offering a glimmer of hope. That hope was extinguished just as a sixth round of talks was scheduled to begin. In June 2025, tensions reached a multi-decade high. Following a series of Israeli strikes on Iran, which Israel claimed were targeting nuclear weapons development, the United States took direct action. President Trump ordered a massive military assault on what Washington described as key nuclear facilities inside Iran. Over 100 aircraft were reportedly involved, dropping dozens of precision bombs. The White House claimed the operation had successfully devastated Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The strikes have sent shockwaves across the globe. Iran's government has denounced the attack as a blatant act of war and has vowed to retaliate, though the form and timing of that retaliation remain unknown. The international community has largely condemned the US action, warning that it could ignite a catastrophic regional war with devastating global consequences. As of today, the situation remains incredibly volatile. Decades of mistrust, from the 1953 coup to the broken nuclear deal, have culminated in this dangerous moment, leaving the path to de-escalation unclear. The history between the United States and Iran shows how deeply past events can shape the present. From a covert coup to a revolution, from a hostage crisis to a broken diplomatic agreement, each chapter has added another layer of suspicion and hostility. Now, with direct military conflict a reality, the future of this relationship and the stability of the entire Middle East hangs precariously in the balance. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. For more in-depth analysis and breaking news, make sure you subscribe to our channel.